uh, what are your core in like any specific railroad companies that catch your attention?
Well, um, a a certain type of railroad company which has always interested me would be the big logging railroads of the Pacific Northwest, like Weyerhaeuser Timber, Rayonier, because I think the one type of train I was most interested in early on were geared locomotives. I've always been a fan of geared locomotives, and I still am. Um, Recently, though, since about 2020, for obvious reasons, I've become much more invested in narrow gauge. And I would say that narrow gauge is usually what I delve into, especially the old companies in the 1870s and 1880s when the narrow gauge was seen as a viable competitor to the standard gauge.
Before starting work on the Railroads Online project, did you have much of an interest for narrow gauge or much knowledge on that?
I had some interest and I had some knowledge, but I I definitely didn't delve too deep into it until after I started working with QMA.
Mhm.
How did you meet Kume? Like how did because I know he was on the American Railroads game, but I've never quite understood like what the connection was, like how you guys all met each other and like started working on Railroads Online and such. So I'd love to know.
So how it began was it was late January of 2020 when I got a Discord message from a friend saying, "Hey, check out this cool narrow gauge train simulator. They've got a climax in there." And I was like, "Oh, geared locomotives. Let me take a look at this." And so that was American Railroad's Summit River and Pine Valley. And at that point, I joined the Discord server and just sort of slowly watched it go on. Some people which I knew started becoming involved with QMA directly for modeling work and whatnot. And for those friends of mine, I started doing research work through books and whatnot to give them photographs and details which they would need for creating models. And then it was in about June of 2020 when I was on vacation in California that I'd been planning to go to the California Railroad Museum, but because it was during COVID, the entire museum was closed to the public, and I remember being very sad because I want to go see the Sonoma, which is a uh, Baldwin 440, which is the same class of engine as the Eureka is. And I just remembered seeing all of the artwork on there and being so enamored by it that I remembered that Kume had a previous model of the Eureka made for the game, which wasn't actually in the final version of American Railroad Summit River and Pine Valley, which we currently have. And I remember messaging him out of the blue. I think this was our first communication, and I said, "Hey, I'm a friend of some of the people who are working for you. I'd like to try my hand at font creation, uh, because lettering is a very complicated thing. But I mean, I'd already had some experience with art, and so he said, "Sure, why not go for it?" And so that's how I got started.
Well, I actually have a question then about like what you said about the Sonoma. So when Baldwin would make all of these engines, you go to a museum and you see the Eureka, right? And you're like, that's the Eureka. So they were kind of doing the same thing like with what EMD did with like SD40s and all of that, but it was with steam locomotives, right? So there were like a lot of quote unquote eurekas out there, but they just weren't like, or were they all like the exact same model of steam engine, or were they just like or were they all different? I guess is my question.
So. it depends on what level of sort of specificity you're going to get into with how close engines are to one another. So Eureka and the Sonoma are both Baldwin Class 818D, no, Class 818C, drawing 440 steam locomotives. So when you look at a Baldwin catalog from back in that era, from 1874 onwards, you would see the modern class system which they had started using. And so if you wanted a 440, let's say, you would pick one of the 8C models. If you wanted a locomotive of a particular size, you would normally have that indicated by the cylinder diameter, which was another number incorporated into the classification system. So, for example, if you wanted a locomotive with cylinders 12 inches in diameter, you would go for an 818C, so a 12-inch cylinder diameter 440. And then what Baldwin would do is that they would have these specific classes like 818C, 818D, 820D, 1034E, and they would continually upgrade them throughout the years when they figured out a new design for this specific class of engine. Not a whole lot would change, but sometimes there would be something to radically demarcate, like, hey, these specific engines are different from the other ones which have come before. And so
Okay.
these would usually be demarcated by a drawing number. So you would start with the first design of, let's say, an 818C. It would be 818C drawing 1. And then by the time you get to the Eureka and the Sonoma, they were already on their fourth design because they were using drawing 4. And these drawings could basically be used for a locomotive of, normally they would try to keep it narrow gauge or standard gauge, but you could basically have almost some sort of mass production. I think there were about 30 or so 818C drawing 4s which were made. I might be very much off on that number, but it was actually a pretty substantial number.
Well,
Um,
that actually leads me into another question. So, if you could explain it to me like I'm 5, what do those Baldwin classification numbers mean? Just for our audience who might not understand, or hosts in this case.
So Baldwin classification works. It's a very rigid system, but it's very accurate. So let's say, well, let's take 818C4 as an example. So the first number 8, that is how many wheels the engine has in total. 8 wheels. So then you go to the next number, which is the cylinder diameter number. For a locomotive with 12-inch diameter cylinders, it corresponds to the number 18. The reason why is that if you take the class number, well, the cylinder number, you divide that by 2 and add 3, then you get the true cylinder diameter. So if you take 18, divide by 2, that's 9. Add 3, and that's 12. So if you want an 818, it is an 8-wheeled locomotive with 12-inch diameter cylinders. Next, you have the driving wheel letter. So they had a little bit of an eclectic system with this because you would expect that a single drivered engine would be Class A. Class B was actually the single drivered engines. Class A were rack locomotives, which
Whoa.
are a little bit wonky. But C refers to a locomotive with 4 driving wheels. D is 6 driving wheels. E is 8 driving wheels. F is 10 driving wheels, and so on. And so if you have an 818C, you have a 8-wheeled locomotive with 12-inch diameter cylinders, and 4 of those wheels are going to be driving wheels. So if you have no other modifying numbers before the wheel letter, then that means it is a 440, with all of the other wheels being in the pilot truck. If you had a number like, so here's where it gets complicated. So you can have fractional numbers which split up the wheels. Usually these would be 1/3 or 1/4. So if you have an 8/18 and a third C, this would mean that the extra carrying wheels are behind the driving wheels. So if you have an 8/18 and a third C, you have an 044. If you
Oh, I
Yes.
see.
Mhm.
Okay.
Another fraction which they used is a quarter. This would split the drive. This would split the carrying wheels as evenly as possible between the between a front pilot truck and a rear pony truck. So if you have an 8/18 and a quarter C, that means you have a 2/4/2.
Okay, that makes
It
sense.
gets it gets a little bit nebulous because let's say you want a 4/4/2 with 18 with 12-inch diameter cylinders. That would be a 10 because 4 plus 4 plus 2 equals 10. That would be a 10/18 and a quarter C. I know it's not a even split because you've got 4 wheels in the pilot truck and 2 in the rear truck, but you just kind of have to suss it out through the specification sheets because it will accurately state uh, in what pairs these wheels are. Um, and then you have the drawing number at the end of the classification system, which is just which successive design of engine is this. So if it's the fourth drawing of a 440 with 12-inch diameter cylinders, it's an 818C4. One other fraction which is important to know is a half, which also goes before the wheel arrangement. Uh, the driving, damn it, the driving wheel letter, which is, so if it's a half, it means that the cylinders are longer than what they normally would be. So it's a little bit more powerful. So this is why you would see in the tech tree like the 818.5C drawing 2. That's a 440 with slightly longer cylinders than what it normally would be.
Okay, yeah, I was wondering about that. Like, cause I remember you explaining this in an abridged way in one of Heiss's videos, and I watched it and I was like, I need to figure this out because I don't know how to read this like chart. You know what I mean? So thank you
It
for
took me
answering
a little
that.
bit.
I'm also figuring out now that I know absolutely dick all about locomotives, and I have a feeling this is going to be a recurring theme as we go on. Uh,
I'm the same now.
Well, there's
as we
always
move on,
something to learn.
so I feel less stupid now. Any interest you have beyond the land of railroading?
So I have a very keen interest in music. Um, Currently, I'm actually studying musicology, and I've actually been a piccolo and flute player for the past 12 years.
Wow.
Um,
Nice.
and I just finished up 8 years of marching band. That was really a lot of fun. Um, see, I mean, I like reading. I'm a big sci-fi fan. I'm currently reading through Dune, and I mean, I'm always looking up like more Warhammer 40,000 lore. Um, so I just kind of have an eclectic uh, mix of taste.
Yeah, I know a few of us in here are musicians.
Mhm.
So, how big are your hands, and do you have trouble playing the piccolo?
Uh, so so my
I was wondering where that was going then.
um, I've never been asked that before, but I mean, uh, I don't think you would really have a problem like playing piccolo with any size hand, except if they're too small, because then you're not going to be able to reach anything. But then again, like that's if you are abnormally small. Um, which there are ways around that, I would think, probably with special key systems or whatnot.
Yeah, I tried my hand at piccolo in high school, and by the time I was in grade 11, when
Hmm.
I tried it, I was actually pressing my. I also have very fat fingers,
Mhm.
So I ended up pressing multiple keys at a time
I
sometimes.
I don't have that exact same problem. Thankfully. Interesting enough, the one area where most people who I know who played flute decided to drop piccolo was because it was too loud or too high pitched, which I mean,
I
it kind of
understand.
shows for me because I've actually lost a little bit of my hearing over the years, but I mean,
Oh, what was
nothing
that?
to a really egregious level, but I mean, it is noticeable. It
Yeah,
exacts a
same.
toll, shall we say.
It's okay, Dozer. I heard that dad joke.
Oh,
What was that?
yeah.
Dozer's making dad jokes.
That's exactly
Trumpet
what.
just walked straight into that one.
I don't even know what he said.
Oh, I asked what was that when he said he lost his hearing.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. Hmm.
right. Okay, so we're gonna. I love music. I know Trumpet loves music. We talked with Heist last week. He loves music. We all love music. We all love trains.
Mhm.
Yes. Um, Speaking about heists, there was a certain incident that happened on a certain tech tree where he may or may not have said, "Here comes the bus. Oh no, the bus hits Armagon." Um,
Yeah, I know of this.
would you like to explain?
Okay, so I didn't initially know that the American Railroad of Puerto Rico 0660 Malay. I didn't know that it was meter gauge until it was too late and I'd already put it onto the tree. That being said, we just need to shave off 3 3/8 inches, if I'm not mistaken, of the frame. Well, actually, it's really like compress it inwards by that amount, and then it will be able to work. Same thing with the Kukuta 262T, which is also on the tech tree. That's also meter gauged, which I did not initially know at first, but I mean, it just kind of made sense. And now uh, I am very, very thoroughly checking what gauge anything which we add is, and I mean,
So, if we're able to take the gauge and shrink it down, big boy when?
no.
Well, you say that, but we have photographic evidence of it being in the game.
I'm pretty sure that was a meme.
All right. Moving on. So you've been with the Railroads Online team for over 2 years now, by the sounds of it, right?
Yeah,
Do you
two
do you
years.
have a highlight? Your favorite moment so far?
I would definitely say that my favorite moment so far has been when QMA added in the current Eureka model uh, into the game with the fonts which I designed for it. I was absolutely floored by just how well it came out, and it was just it made me really happy to see my work actually come to fruition and people enjoying it. That really made me happy.
Yeah, the Eureka is a beautiful model. Like I like sometimes I'll just stop and I'll just like stare at it. I won't even like drive it because it's just like so. No, I mean I will drive it, but it's like it just looks so nice. Like you honestly did some really good work there.
Yes, and so on the current Eureka model, only the fonts are my actual work. I can say that we are rebuilding the model, um, because there were a couple proportion issues with the old model. I mean, it still looks good, and I'm not bashing QMA for this at all because he was working with what details which we had. It's just that we have better documents now, and we basically have a redo of the Eureka model done, and I can quite confidently for that model say that most of the heavy paint work is going to be mine. I've already shown off some common stuff in the Railroads Online server, also for the Glenbrook, which is a very similar engine, which is going to have the exact same paint options. So if you've seen any of that, then you kind of know what's coming.
Well, I have a question about the Eureka specifically. So I saw a picture in the official Discord of something that rather shocked me, and it was an image of the Eureka, but it was converted to an oil burner, and its beautiful cow catcher had been cut off and replaced with like kind of like a block pilot with a knuckle coupler on the
And it
front.
has that very short shotgun stack as well, with kind
Yeah.
of a little collar around the base. I know that photograph, yeah.
Yeah, what's going on with that? Like what did they like what why did that come about? And like I saw also in the thing that they're going to like add like upgrade and variations of all these locomotives into the game at some point. But like what was like the real life purpose of that?
So at that point, the Eureka was owned by the Sierra Nevada Wood and Lumber Company, which was a subsidiary of the Hobart Mills Estate Company. Uh, so the Eureka, I mean, it was delivered to the Eureka and Palisade Railroad in 1875, and as near as I can put it, it retained its original look into maybe about the late 1880s. After that, I mean, it still looked like it did. However, all of the fancy gilded paintwork had actually been covered up with black paint because it was just easier for railroads to repaint it. And so by the time it came to the Sierra Nevada, it lost the original cowcatcher in favor of a switcher pilot just so that brakemen and whatnot could stand on the front running boards for yard hops and then also for coupling. It lost its Radley Hunter stack in favor of a very bare bones shotgun stack because it had been converted to burn oil. Uh, because you don't need a big spark arrestor with oil burners. And I mean, apart from that, it kept its original tank cistern, I think, and then also its original cab is still intact, which was really surprising for that. So it basically boils down to what the needs of its current owner were, which was a very hardworking, no frills logging locomotive.
Yeah, that's nuts. But they did keep the original boiler. Like the Eureka is still running today with its original boiler.
Hmm. That is correct.
That's insane. How did they do that? Like that I just can't imagine. Like they replaced like boilers on like younger steam locomotives. But that's still running with like an 18 and hundreds and change boiler.
Hmm. Um, The original 1875 boiler, the only way it really could have survived into the present day was that it was lovingly taken care of by all of its shop crews throughout the year, and nobody did anything bad to it. It really is just a matter of sheer luck in that it was so well kept for so many years.
Yeah, amazing. It still passes the inspections.
Well, its current owner, Dan Markov, he doesn't operate it that often as he would do like just a couple days of steam up per year at the Nevada State Railroad Museum in Boulder City, Nevada. But other than that, it really doesn't get a workout. He really likes to operate it as little as possible to keep it for as long as possible, if that makes sense.
No,
Right.
that does.
All right. So, what goes into the process of researching and getting a new engine into the game? Can you take us through that?
So it begins with the research. What you do is you first look for photographs and technical drawings, and then also written text like anecdotes and specifications, which you can find. Uh, because the photographs and all of the written text is going to help inform you how to go about running off of a technical drawing. And so then what you do for modeling is you start building the engine in a 3D modeling program, and then you use the photographs and the technical specifications as sort of like a check to be able to look at and affirm that what you're doing is the right thing. So once you're done modeling the engine, then it goes to UV mapping and unwrapping, and then texturing. Texturing is usually the last point in the process, and then usually how we do it, by that time you will port it into Unreal 4 and see if it works. And then we hand the model off to QMA, and he will assign the locomotive its weight, its power, basically all of the specifications, and basically just how the engine's supposed to behave. And then it's just a bunch of playtesting after that to make sure that that's working correctly, and then it makes it into the full game for everybody to try out.
That brings up another question I have. I have a lot of questions today. So let's say you have an engine where only a very grainy photograph of it exists. How do you go about making that into something that is functional in the game?
So, just so that I get the exact parameters of your question, are you saying that we only have like a single grainy photograph, like no technical drawings, no erecting parts, no nothing?
Well, let's say you did have like, you know, the maybe technical drawings, but in terms of what the engine like actually looked like, it's like obscured or like, so, you know, there's just no way to like, or limited ways to like visualize the actual locomotive. Like all you have is like, you know, just like the pencil drawing.
So you can build the engine off of technical drawings, but if you want to get all of the aesthetics of the engine right, what you look at is similar engines from the same builder from the same era. Because usually these builders, by the time which we're dealing with in the game, the 1870s onwards, they would have more or less codified what their design and aesthetic practices were. So you can make pretty well-informed guesses about how a certain thing on the engine would have looked, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one good example of this would be that the Rio Grande Mountain you guys are trying to put in the game at some point. Like, because all that exists there, as far as I can recall, is just that one uh, drawing. But I remember Heiss was saying, like you'd put some like heavy, or as he put it, heavy K parts on there, like from the K class Mikados and stuff, and you can sort of approximate, um, you know, what it would have looked like.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts on like that?
That is actually the exact thing which we would be doing for a proposal locomotive like that.
Okay, cool.
Hmm.
Right. So, going in more into the researching, how many of you research the trains, or do you collaborate on the same trains together? Or is everyone looking independently at a different train? How does that dynamic work?
Well, the modelers, they usually look into the locomotive which they're making themselves, but they usually will also delegate a lot of research and, of course, graphic arts things to me because that's just my area of specialty, and I am usually the one in the team who keeps tabs on all of uh, col- our collaborative research efforts. So we'll basically share all materials between us. Um, and I mean, that's basically how it works. And then you've got other people are affiliated with us who will just go out looking for something just because they want to, and then they find something useful, and then they'll bring it back to us.
All right. And during your research process, what's the most interesting thing you've come across during your research?
Oh dear, this is a very interesting question. I think the most interesting stuff. which I've been involved with, has got to be Baldwin Locomotive Works paint, because that is a continually unfolding rabbit hole, which just keeps on going deeper with how much more I look. Uh, because I'm in contact with a couple very knowledgeable people about their paint work, and I always feel like I learn something new every single time.
And this is just on paint.
It's just on paint, yes.
Well, that is
Well, paint refers not only to the colors used, but also the lining and decorative designs, and of course font work.
Ooh, that makes me wonder. What is your favorite Baldwin style?
Okay, there were 379 of them. um, I would probably have to say my favorite Baldwin style. Ooh, this is a tricky one. It depends on what era which we're looking at, because I actually drew up a giant document of all of the styles which I wanted to make for Railroads Online. And I think I'm doing maybe about 100 of them, but they're all like mix and match of common components. So, I mean, yes, it is like about 100 of them, but it's only maybe about like 150 different components, but there's like 6 components for each different uh, style. I would probably say though that my favorite generation of styles is the first generation because that was the most decorative, and my favorite style from that first generation is style 27. So if you look at the Eureka in the game, it's wearing style 1, which uses type 1 cab, cylinders, domes, drivers, and tender tank. Style 27 is basically exactly like that, except it uses type 8 drivers, which are a bright vermilion color. And so all of the wheels on the engine are like bright red. And I
Whoa.
think it's a really eye-catching experience to really see these things in action. Um, that actually, so Style 27 and its freight locomotive counterparts, Style 37, they used to be, before the Book of Styles was introduced in 1874, in 1873, they were like the common schemes. Basically, all engines had bright red wheels, which is how you would normally see American engines from like the 1850s to the early 1870s.
Right, that's
But
a classic site, like big
exactly,
440, bright red wheels, like
mhm, like Jupiter or the 119.
are
Um,
those style 27?
no, those are not Baldwin engines, but
Oh.
that's just in reference to what bright red wheels on an engine would look like. However, by 1874, when the Book of Styles was introduced and Baldwin actually codified for the first time what its paint schemes for its engines would be, they decided to make the wheels less ornate because it was a general trend from the 1850s onwards that locomotive paint became uh, less frilly. And so in 1874, they decided that the wheels would, on the wholesale, be the same base color as the rest of the engine. Style 27 and Style 37, which were the passenger and freight schemes for the more opulent locomotives, they were a return to the vermilion red wheels from earlier eras, and they were specifically requested by customers. Styles 1 and 3 were their normal counterparts, which would be what Baldwin would just put on an engine if the buyer didn't order anything specific. And so I just kind of like that more opulent version. There's actually a save file I want to construct for the game whenever we get like a California redwood map, which just uses styles 27 and 37 because I like bright red.
I just looked up Baldwin Style 3 just to see what it's like. It is very similar to the Eureka paint, but it's like the boiler is like a gray color with like gold trim. I also
So,
really like. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
well, the boiler wasn't considered part of the paint because at that time there were not any heat-resistant paints in existence. And so,
Oh.
usually in illustrations of locomotives from that era, it would be varying shades of gray, just based upon whatever the artist was feeling like. But they're all supposed to be Russia iron, which is a type of planished iron, which could actually not kind of die if it was exposed to the high heat of the boiler. It was just supposed to shine with its own luster because you couldn't put paint on it because the paint would melt off. And then the boiler bands, which affix the jacket in place, those could be iron or those could be brass. Usually, engines of this era, you would see brass.
Hmm. I'm looking at the Style 51. I really like that one. That's like
Uh,
olive green with gold trim for those who don't know what that is.
yeah, and so the styles, they were actually disconnected from the base color and the trim color because you could have a Style 1 engine in wine red, you could have it uh, in lake brown, or you could have it in olive green. But for the purposes of the game, we're just having wine and lake brown, and also black. Don't forget black. You could order a Baldwin engine in black at any point in time. Um, and then the trim color, early on, it would be gold, which would be actual gold leaf paint,
Oh,
or it would be color, which would be like an imitation gold, yellow paint. And then later on, they had aluminum come along, which is like a silver gray. But that
okay.
wouldn't be until the 1890s, and you would basically only see aluminum with styles which had a singular color of lining.
Okay.
Mhm.
We are seeing some olive green engines. Like the new Class 70 is coming in olive green, as well as some of the Porter Type Cs, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Not, uh, I think Porter used dark green on their later engines. No. No. No, they didn't, because yeah, they would have used green on some of their engines if they were affiliated with the Pennsylvania Railroad, but Porter basically just kind of used Pennsylvania Railroad stuff, which usually has Tuscan red bands on the boiler or the tank.
Yeah, and I'm just realizing now if it was made by Porter, they probably wouldn't be using Baldwin styles. So that's,
No.
you know. But
Okay. Well, did everything cut out? Just got silent.
oh no, I just stopped
Oh no.
talking.
All right.
No, I was
I got
Shut my
worried
I was
there.
trap.
Yeah,
I
it
was just
sounded
waiting.
like halfway through a sentence there.
Yeah.
No. I was done with what I was saying, so feel free to
Well,
proceed on to the next question.
I want a full locomotive in pure white, snow white, so I can use it as Canadian camouflage.
Oh my God.
Yes. Um, but let's move on to the future of railroads online because
Mhm.
I am sure you have great insight into that. Have you started researching any unreleased locomotives yet?
Few.
Are you allowed to say which ones?
Uh, so I mean, we're basically working off of the version 6 technically at this point, but we did have a little Baldwin from 1878 come up recently, which uses common parts from the 622D1 060 that Block just built, and it's a 460 with really small drivers. And it's really cute.
Oh boy,
Uh,
yeah.
that is the only engine which I'm probably really gonna speak about right now. Um, Other than that, we really don't have anything else much unannounced.
All right, all right. So what's going on with the freight tech tree? Is there anything interesting in there, or
So the freight car tech tree, I'm thankfully almost done with it. I've got a couple more things to run by some of the more knowledgeable people who I'm in contact with. But I think we've got it fairly well nailed down. Sort of like the passenger car tech tree, you usually have a range of certain builders, but we really tried to go for kind of commonality of parts, which could lead to different versions. And so probably the biggest builders for early stock, which are definitely less builders but more homogeneous equipment. The largest manufacturers of stock you're going to see is going to be either Billmeyer and Smalls or Carter Brothers. And thankfully, and so what you'll notice with the freight car tech tree is that there are also listed under each car like possible other versions, which is basically just a way to keep the tech tree compact but still open the door for different things. And you'll see on there that let's take the 17-foot two-axle Billmeyer and Smalls gondola, which no, the flat car, which has been already built and revealed by Bruss. Under other possible versions, you've got gondola, and so even though there isn't an icon for this car in the gondola line, it's just saying that a gondola version will also be available, and so that's just us to kind of keep it down and compact because there's something like 40 or 50 entries on the tech tree just with all of this folding going on.
That's a lot of freight cars.
Mm.
Yeah, but thankfully it's just a lot of commonality of parts and small changes.
Right, because I've been looking at some of the finished products, like for example the flat cars, the tier 1, the tier 2, and the tier 3 are basically the same, just with different
Yeah,
sides.
so the flat cars which you just mentioned, those are all folded into the same entry on the tech tree. That's what I mean about these other possible versions.
Right. And like the tank car is basically just a tank added on top of a tier 1.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we've we basically already built all of the different versions which can be made for the Bodie and Benton 24-foot 9-inch flat cars. So that's what has been publicly announced so far.
That's awesome.
I'm loving the new box car. That looks really good.
Which box car are we talking about?
The 4500 series.
That one. Yeah, that one's a really good looking
And
one.
the new
There
one
are, yeah,
in the making.
there are shorter versions of that car which can be made, and then there's also at least one longer version of those cars, which I know of.
Right.
Mhm,
I
Yeah, the new textures look amazing. I like the brown texture.
mhm. I'm really uh I'm really happy with the paintwork that uh Daniel has done because all those different base colors is going to allow players to have more options for customization, which is I think is always a good thing to try and do for a game like this.
Speaking of customization, I don't think this is one of the questions coming up. In terms of like the liveries and things like that, is that something that there'll be multiple liveries added to um, locos or wagons, or is it just going to be the base one? Then when the Steam Workshop comes out, that's when users can make their own liveries.
So users will be able to make their own with the workshop. Like you can, like I definitely expect to see like a bright pink and purple polka dot class 70 at some point. Which has already been memed at previously. But for locomotives, I mean, most of my research is into the Baldwin styles. But where we can, we'll try and do practical liveries that will be available. I think, let me actually pull it up. So let me check. For the 622D1060ST that Glock just made, I have, let's see, I have 32 different liveries planned for it.
Oh, that's a lot.
Wow.
Yeah, but as I said, it's just a bunch of common components which are mixed and matched.
Hmm. Interesting. And do you know how that will be like implemented then with changing the livery?
I don't currently have an idea for how it's actually going to be implemented. I don't think QMA has done any work on it so far. I'm very, very excited to see it when he actually does get along to it. But I think the most practical way is to have each livery as sort of like a mesh which is put onto the engines. Like the engine, well, yeah, I think that's how it's going to work, and then just kind of uh, changing whichever livery is going to change the mesh which appears, if that sort of makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah.
Right. Is there any more insight that you can give to us of what might be coming up soon?
Well, we've got uh, the fabled spline update coming, but of course we're gonna have new models for locomotives and cars coming. That's really all I'm at liberty to say right now, mainly because that's what we're really focusing on.
Fair enough. I'm happy with that. Yeah, we can't wait for the spline update, and it's going to be quite literally a game changer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think any more questions from Trumpeter Sprody?
Well, I did get a special message from the Heisler himself,
Uh-oh.
and he sent me 6 messages, and all of them say Silopagon.
Oh yeah, Silopagon.
To which I replied by sending Salopgon and Salopanog, just to troll him a little bit. But yeah, I mean that new 440 with the enormous drive wheels, that thing. I saw the new tech tree video. That thing is crazy. 65 mph on the narrow gauge.
Yeah. Um, you really got. I mean, of course, it is also going to be a Vulcan compound, so fuel efficiency, yay. But it is going to be a maintenance hog,
Oh yeah.
so there are pros and cons to each design. It's just a matter of what you're willing to put up with, I guess.
Nice.
All right. So, first, we'll like to take this time to thank you, Armagon, for coming on and taking time out of your busy schedule just to talk trains with us and life with us. It's much appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
We have one last section. This is just going to be quick. I expect your answers to be quick because it is
Rapid
rapid
fire
fire
questions.
Dun-dun-dun.
All right, are you ready?
Yes.
All right, question number 1. Favorite train model in the game?
In the game right now,
Yes.
the Eureka.
Favorite meal to get? Anywhere.
Uh, um, there's a local southern restaurant which does buttermilk fried chicken, Carolina gold rice, and collard greens. That slaps every time I get it.
That does sound like it slaps. Favorite drink? Non-alcoholic or alcoholic?
Vanilla milkshake.
Nice.
Nice. Uh, your holy trinity of movies. Your top 3 films.
The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, and The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King.
Good answer.
A trilogy for the top 3. I love it. Are there more doors or wheels in the world?
Ooh. I think there are going to be slightly more wheels.
Any explanation of why?
Uh, coupes exist.
All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap us up here. Thank you once again, Armagon, for coming on. It's been a
Thank you
pleasure.
for having me.
From Trumpet and Sprody, this is Dozer. Once again, thanking you for choosing us. Thank you for stopping by, and we'll see you next time.
Take the last train to Clarksville and I'll meet you at the station. You can